The Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the Week 7 matchup between the Arkansas Razorbacks and the BYU Cougars. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 7. Both teams are coming off of losses heading to this matchup. Arkansas has lost 3 straight heading into Week 7, and BYU, of course, lost to Notre Dame last week. So this is a crucial game for both these teams if either team still wants to have a great season. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting out with your team trends. Arkansas lost to Mississippi State 17-40 in their Week 6 matchup. So coming off of a brutal loss to Mississippi State, who is definitely on the rise right now. They were ranked 23rd last week, and now they're in the top 20. And once again, Arkansas being 3-3, they've taken 3 straight losses heading to this matchup. So obviously after this team started out 3-0, they were ranked decently high, and after 3 straight losses, they have dropped out of the rankings entirely. But then BYU on the flip side, they lost to Notre Dame 28-20. Tough loss there as well for BYU. They're 4-2 on the season. And, I mean, of course, this is the second loss in 4 weeks. BYU isn't on a big losing streak like Arkansas is right now, but BYU certainly ever since that Oregon loss just hasn't looked the same. I mean, they beat Wyoming, beat Utah State, but not very convincingly. And so for them to lose to Notre Dame, quite honestly, wasn't very surprising. But that said, BYU is at home once again in this matchup, and your kickoff is 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time on Saturday, October 15th. Spread's going to Arkansas here by 1.5, so Razorbacks are barely favored in this matchup, just about as close as it can get. Over under 66, and the FPI is going BYU, disagreeing with the spread here, going 64% towards the Cougars. And this is also the first matchup between these two teams in their histories. So that's an interesting fact here about this matchup. Stat comparison for this one: Arkansas 62nd in points per game this season, 92nd in points allowed. So this is a team that's struggled on defense this season. That's been something that has just been an issue so far this year. I mean, they allowed 40 to Mississippi State last week. They allowed 50 to Alabama, which you're never going to beat Alabama when they score 50 on you. And of course, I mean, there have been other points in the season, like they allowed 30 to South Carolina, even though they still beat them, allowed 27 to Missouri State. So this is, once again, a recurring issue for Arkansas this season is the defense. But, I mean, offensively, they've shown promise, not so much in the passing game, as they're 101st in passing yards a game, and then they're 8th in rushing yards a game. This is a strong team in the backfield and in the rushing game. And as for BYU, 34th in points per game, 61st in points allowed. They're 40th in passers games, 60th in rush yards. And if you compare the yards allowed for both these teams, Arkansas is one of the worst teams in the nation in the defensive secondary and in the passing defense, being 118th in pass yards allowed, and then they're 88th in rush yards allowed. So once again, defensively, Arkansas is just not a very strong team. And BYU is fairly strong in the passing defense. They're 20th in that area, and then they're 93rd in rush yards allowed. So if you take that into consideration, BYU being primarily a passing offense, they got a great quarterback in Jaron Hall, going up against a really poor Arkansas pass defense. That's something to keep in mind here. And Arkansas is strong in the rushing game there, once again being 8th in the nation in rush yards a game, which is outstanding. They're going up against a rush defense in BYU that's 93rd. So there's strengths and weaknesses for both these teams that both teams can take advantage of, and that's why it's expected to be such a close game here. Your recent matchups: Arkansas lost to Mississippi State 17-40. Of course, they lost to Alabama the week before, 26-49. Lost to Texas A&M 21-23. That was, man, what a brutal loss that was for Arkansas. And ever since that game, it's just been tough for the Razorbacks to get back on the right track. And I mean, yeah, that was a brutal loss there for Arkansas. I mean, that's one that you definitely want back, especially the way it ended off of a field goal off of the top of the upright. I mean, they were that close to winning that game over Texas A&M, and I mean, who knows, if they beat A&M there, potentially they would have been more competitive against Alabama. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of what ifs, but the storyline right now for Arkansas is that they're 3-3. As for BYU, they lost to Notre Dame 20-28, beat Utah State, and beat Wyoming once again. Both those games were wins, but they weren't terribly convincing considering Utah State and Wyoming aren't terribly good football teams. They lost to Oregon 20-41. That was a very surprising loss, especially in the fashion that it happened. And once again, ever since that loss, they just haven't looked the same. They looked great, though, in Week 2 when they beat Baylor 26-20 in double overtime, and BYU was ranked fairly high after that Baylor win. And once again, the next week they play Oregon on the road, and it doesn't go too well But I still think BYU is a team with tremendous potential. They've got the talent. I mean, off of last season was a great one for BYU, and this team they've got a lot of their talent back from last season. So I still think BYU is very much capable of having a great season. Same with Arkansas. I mean, Arkansas' ceiling is still very high based on, the returning production off of last season, which was a great season for the Razorbacks. Key points for this one: Arkansas 3-3 after starting 3-0. They've lost 3 straight. So, this team is seemingly on the downward trend right now, but this is a huge opportunity for Arkansas to get back on the right track, and it's not going to be an easy one, though, going on the road to BYU. But defensively, got to be better. That's going to be a key for this game for Arkansas, is being good and being better on defense. Allowing 40 points to Mississippi State last week. Especially an Arkansas team that, they're good on offense, but they're not outstanding. So it's like your defense, it needs to come through and force some turnovers and keep the game competitive, and Arkansas just hasn't done that the past couple of weeks. So defensively, got to be better for this one, and this is a crucial game for Arkansas to get back on the right track, especially if they want to be competitive still in the SEC. The SEC is such a competitive conference, and so, to take a loss against a non-conference opponent, which turns out to be a pretty good team in BYU here, is not something that you want, especially if you want to get to a decent bowl game at the end of the day. But as for BYU, they've been down ever since they lost to Oregon. Once again, you can kind of notice a shift there. Obviously, they only played 2 games before that Oregon matchup, and of course they played South Florida and Baylor before that. But I think BYU is capable of much more than we're seeing right now. Jaron Hall remains an outstanding quarterback. His stats are great on the season so far: 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns, 2 picks. So he's off to a good start in this season, and they got the home field advantage as well. And once again, a big factor is that they're strong in the passing game. And if you look at Arkansas and their defense that's been poor this season, their biggest weakness is in the defensive secondary. So that said, let's get to the prediction here for Arkansas and BYU coming up here in Week 7. This one is a tough one. It's a close one, almost a coin toss, but I'm going with BYU here. 31-27 is my predicted final score. And for that reason that I just mentioned, BYU's passing game, they're strong in the passing game. They're also good in the backfield, but especially in the passing game with Jaron Hall and a talented receiving core, going up against an Arkansas team that's allowed an average of 307 pass yards a game this season. I just think BYU has their way in this matchup, and Arkansas's got some advantages too, going up against a BYU defense that's been vulnerable at times. But I like BYU at home in this matchup, especially with Arkansas coming off of 3 straight losses. I feel like BYU, both these teams are in need of a win right now. You got BYU, who's lost 2 of their last 4. Arkansas, once again, who's lost 3 in a row. This is a huge game for both these teams, and I think it's going to be back and forth. We see both teams go back and forth in this one, but BYU in the end wins this game by 4. Once again, extremely close and could go either way. I'm going to say 55% towards the Cougars, over under 66. I'll take the under for this one and BYU to cover the spread in the end. It's currently a 1.5-point spread towards Arkansas, but I do think BYU covers that. And in the end, I'll take the under for this one. I do think, if you think Arkansas is going to win, might as well take the over, quite honestly, because Arkansas is probably going to need to score a lot of points, considering their defense is allowing an average of 32 points a game. But for BYU, if you're predicting the Cougars to win, honestly, probably more comfortable taking the under for this one, with that being said. So with that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.